So there's with some of the changes with the environment that our firefighters face, there's a trend towards some big catastrophic losses in areas. The fires are larger upon our arrival because they've had time to grow in a different fuel load, and the detection, if it isn't up front and right away, they've grown undetected, and then they explode with a lot of velocity. So there's going to be some new approaches that we're going to have to do in the fire service, and that's going to be to look at staffing levels very, very carefully. What is the best staffing level to meet the risk that this community faces? And that's going to be a little different for each community. It's going to be based on what they can afford. It's going to be based on the risk profile of that community. And there's also some things that we have to look at in how we train our firefighters. The old just go in and you have plenty of time to go deep into a structure, fight the fire, and you're protected by that legacy construction with the true dimensional lumber doesn't exist anymore. Now we're having, trusses that are collapsing within 10 to 11 minutes, because those gusset plates fail. So the training on how we train our people to think and to think strategically, and make risk-based decisions, from officers all the way through to our newest firefighter. How we deploy our apparatus. Do we really need to send an engine and an ambulance to every single medical call, even if it's a sprained ankle? Maybe not. Maybe there's a better way to do that. Maybe there's a risk reduction metrics that goes in there. And instead of just doing it the way we've always done it, we need to rethink how we deploy our apparatus, the nature of the equipment that we carry, and especially with regard to other communities. If I have a community that's a mile away and they have a ladder truck, and I only have 20 or 30 calls a year that require a ladder truck, do I need to get a ladder truck too? Probably not. Maybe we should consolidate into one department. So the nature of the equipment they have, the community risk reduction programs that we have, that needs to really have a lot of emphasis placed on it. Again, prevention, and have an adequate water supply so that when we do have a fire, we do have the adequate water supplies. And then we also have an effective alerting system, those sensors, those early detection methods. So there's some things that the fire service, I think, is going to have to change as they go forward. And just the whole interior attack versus exterior attack. There was an old belief that we pushed fire by, using a cooling stream from the outside. Well, that's been fairly well debunked by the NIST studies and the NFPA studies. We can improve conditions for people inside by putting in, an outside stream. So there's a lot of things, and I could go through a list of things that I think a future fire department will have, but I think it's going to involve, advanced biotelemetry, like I talked about, with monitoring the firefighters' physical, conditions. It's going to include artificial intelligence, and I don't mean just at the scene. I mean in the dispatch call itself. The stress measured in people's voices. The Swedish people have done some really good studies on that, for a predictive model on whether there's a cardiac arrest involved just based on the stress in a caller's voice. Some of that virtual mixed and augmented reality, I think that's going to be a big part of the fire service going forward, rather than doing actual live burns and live trainings. We're going to be able to, and especially in some of these areas. So when you put that in along with your automatic driving vehicles and some of this detection equipment that now exists with computers, like the edge detection and object recognition and things that would an otherwise unaware firefighter be aware, oh, there's an elevator shaft there I don't want to fall into, but it's all smoky and I wouldn't have seen that otherwise, unless I had that object recognition or detection type of, software. And then, of course, we have the facial recognition software, the 360 videos, and then the things that data is capable of. The live streaming of the situation will give you an awareness of what's going on as you're responding. So that officer in that fire engine will be able to see from that traffic camera, that there's two vehicles involved. One person's out of the vehicle. It appears two are trapped. Oh, we have a fire. So let's make sure that, we have water supply coming if we don't have a hydrant. All of those things that then can be triggered by what they're seeing, that may not have been relayed by the caller to dispatch. So there's going to be a lot of things. And then the last one is really smart cities. There's some initiatives, around the globe to kind of bring things together. And I think fire service is going to be a part of smart cities. It's not going to be a standalone. That service is not going to be by itself. So it's really a safety system that is integrated with, law enforcement and with, prevention, rather than, we just go to fires.
What would I like to see, let's say 10 years from now? If you've ever been exposed or heard of a system called building information modeling, the industry that construct buildings, design buildings, they use building information modeling. And once the building is built and now occupied, the owner and the building engineers have that program to whereas they can look at anything and everything in their building in a 3D fashion. If a valve behind a wall or behind an access panel, if a valve should fail, and it was just say the water system, whether it be the domestic supply or whether it be the water for the fire protection system, if a valve should fail, or let's say a branch line of a plumbing supply or fire protection branch line need repair, the building engineer has the ability to just open up the program, look at his computer screen, look at that branch line, and in 3D, actually behind the wall, he can see the valve. Oh, that's the valve I have to close, or send somebody up there to close the valve. Now, if the fire service would be allowed to use that system, in other words, at some point in time, the building owners, managers, managing agents, if they could provide the fire service access to that program, if we're there for an explosion or some type of an issue, we could also look at that screen, real-time data, and direct our units. I want you to go up to the 6th floor, go over to the A stairwell, and right outside the entrance door, you're going to see a ceiling hatch. Right under that hatch, there's a valve. I want you to close it. Yeah, that's how good we're going to get someday.
Today, I had a call for my position as an adjunct with the University of Cincinnati that was in partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers, and it was on advanced air mobility specifically. So some of what was shared about remote sensing, photogrammetry, LiDAR, light detection and ranging, 3D mapping capabilities for digital terrain maps was really quite impressive, something that I've been adjacent to for a number of years, but seeing some of the work that some of the teams are doing is incredible. And then when we talk about UAV, UAS, drone, we need to remember that there's a number of manufacturers building out autonomous vehicle systems that, for terrestrial, for the average driver, that's where enterprise is going. And so the first response community needs to be prepared for that. I had a call recently along these things with the program manager at NASA JPL on their AI program, that they're currently doing a project with the U.S. Department of Commerce, the National Highway Safety Transportation Administration, and the International Chiefs of Police on how can we notify drivers of first response vehicles prior to a collision. And crash of the line of duty deaths in America, both law enforcement and fire, about 25% of the losses are related to collisions. And how could we use computer vision and AI, machine vision, in 360 video with Internet of Things and smart cities and all of that to prevent collisions? So there are going to be lots of autonomous systems, both airborne and ground-based.
I think the fire service of the future will fully embrace technology, science. We'll see an integration of technology on a scale that is unlike anything that we are currently seeing. I think we're seeing the initial stages, certainly over the last 8 to 10 years, both information and data. We're seeing the availability of real-time data, cross-platform sharing of that data and information. that's accurate and consistent amongst different organizational structures, whether they be governmental, municipal, or organizational within various municipalities. There's a greater degree of acceptance to have that type of a sharing. But at the same time, I think the biggest challenges that we have is that maintaining the security of that type of cross information sharing. Real-time information in the field will be something that we'll be taking for granted. I mean, currently we are struggling to try to get real-time data relative to building intelligence information in our structural fire conditions. We're looking and relying on a variety of different resources currently, just because they now have risen to that level of being able to be achievable, acceptable. We have the technological literacy to understand how to utilize and implement that, whether it be through our tablets and smartphones. I mean, even something as simple as that is now allowing us and allowing emergency managers and personnel to operate in the field with real-time data based upon something as simple as a motor vehicle accident, because of the change in types of fuels and construction and technology. Something as simple as providing EMS service and then doing an extrication now has a higher degree of reliance on understanding the technology that's specific to that particular vehicle, that in the past, again, it was just pretty straightforward. So I think that we are seeing the ability to identify the resources and implement them in a manner that's acceptable to a larger group, and that cooperative sharing amongst agencies is the next big step. The fire service of the future, both the emergency service, fire protection services, is going to rely much more on that type of information sharing from a data standpoint, what I call building intelligence or emergency scene intelligence. There's a variety of different groups that are working toward those efforts on an international basis within the global communities of the emergency management profession, all trying to develop the best practices based upon their implementations on the local or national level within those various countries. So it'll still rely on, so here's the caveat, it will still rely on the foundations of the manual efforts to do what we have to do. Emergency service personnel will still be required to work sort of hand in hand with patients. Fire service personnel within the fire departments and the brigades are still going to have to respond and interact in a manual fashion within structures and within incident scenes. There will be a greater degree of reliance on that data sharing, real-time data, geospatial information, GIS, having pre-fire plan information that's immediately available with systems and layering of all this information, and then allowing for critical decision-making processes that still rely on the individuals to be able to communicate within sort of a real-time setting. That will never take its place, but it's going to certainly create a different way of doing business.
Definitely, not only being able to see the information, see what dispatch is telling us, reading the actual address again, seeing what the call's about, being able to have, I would say, like to go a little deeper and to pull a layer or two back behind and say, could we know how many times we went to that address? What type of building is it? What's room and contents? What's important in that building? I think those kind of pieces, and knowing why, you would not always have like maybe a small community like us in a small fire department where we're the same people going on those calls. But if you were down here on the highway and, you weren't your A, B, or C shift, you don't really know each other's calls, since you don't know if you're going to the same place, many times to know about its history. So it'd be nice to have that. And this other piece that's really important here in America is our fire reporting system, our fire incident reporting system, INFIRS. It starts with N for national. And I would love to see that data be able to be put in while you're on the call, while you're coming back from the call, and being able for it to plug and play and go right to that system, so we don't have to go put that information in again.